Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a loot Swordcraft. This deck is an interesting one, although, I don't know. Honestly, I had some fun playing it initially. A few of the games went pretty well, but then kind of hit a semi-bad losing streak where I was just coming up against decks that would just instantly wipe everything I played, and I just could not get a footing for a while. And it feels like that's typically how Sword ends up going when you're playing a loot Sword, from what I've experienced so far, both as versing loot swords and playing as loot sword. It's very hit or miss, it seems like, so far. You're running, obviously, all of the Omen stuff, so all the way to Usurpation, because it's all loot generator cards. I'm actually kind of sad that that's how they shaped up all the Omens for Sword. They're basically just all loot cards, which, I mean, is fine, but hey. I think a more aggro-based variant would be a little bit better than focusing purely on loot and just kind of taking advantage of Heir of Usurpation just a little bit, because like the burst damage you can do with this deck is very good. The problem is maintaining that through the current meta of healing. So a lot of the crafts have really good healing mechanics now. Both Rune and Haven obviously have very strong healing mechanics. Even Forest has a pretty okay healing mechanic, although it's definitely on the weaker side because Lion and stuff just isn't that effective. And then, of course, Abyss also has some healing in Cerberus and a few other cards. So, like, all of those have pretty good healing mechanics and overall are pretty good decks. They aren't terrible at this stage. And it really does mean that it's hard to just beat through stuff. Oh, and Portal as well with its amulet setup can also heal quite a bit. So it can be hard for Sword to really just commit the damage. Really, the only luck that you can kind of have is against Dragon a little bit, because Dragon's healing just isn't as crazy. So you can kind of swamp them out pretty easily normally. But hey, we're going to get right into it and check the deck out. So our first match here is Sword versus Sword. I typically like to stick with a reasonably low initial curve. So I try and obviously keep the Heir of Usurpation, but everything else I usually just try and focus on getting some low stuff, so that I can start generating cards. I also did find that the draw engine in this deck just isn't really there. So you can be a little brutal when you just dead draw and you just run out of cards. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it can be pretty bad. But yeah, you really just want to push as much damage as you can and get whatever you can on the board. The other legendary, which is the one this guy has here, I haven't actually used that thing much. The few times I used it, it was okay, but it was never insane. It's kind of just fine, honestly. More often than not, that's how I found it. Like, it was a fine card, but it wasn't insane. Heir of Usurpation is definitely the stronger of the two, being a face damage and board clear all in one. Although, it does mean the deck becomes pretty Evo heavy, so you really have to think about where you play your Evos sometimes. But again, want to be pretty aggressive. Sometimes I'll even use the boots and stuff as a push for damage. Because both boots and blade, I believe, are pretty decent for doing damage, because blade can ping for 1 and boots can add 1 to a unit that has storm. So, well, it can add to any unit, but particularly I like to put it on storm units. Or sometimes super roll units that just need 1 more damage to boot over things. So from here, it's really just a matter of, you know, fusing stuff off a little bit and then clearing and going for damage. It's usually how I like to play this deck. Unfortunately, in this case, I didn't have the advantage of using Super Evo, but I really needed to clear that, and I couldn't think of another really good way to do it without wasting more Evo points anyway, so... Plus a 5-6 body is pretty decent, so this should hopefully absorb at least some damage here. Like, we're going to eat this entire unit that they invested, you know, loot cards and Evo point into, which I think is more than fine. And Sword themselves also has, Gilded Goblet as a pretty okay healing mechanic. So it can just make these matches harder than they need to be. I think Zirconia is still incredibly powerful though. Being able to develop boards with Zirconia and then have to have them cleared is a lot better, which usually does force the Heir of Usurpation from the opponent, like you're going to see here. It's pretty common that this is the path they go down. It also forced the Super Evo point, which is always worth it. Unfortunately, though, it does leave us on just 10 health, which is not a good spot to be. The only real advantage here is that I can use my own Usurpation, or I could potentially even use Odin. I do end up just playing the Usurpation, though, because Odin could potentially get us lethal in the next turn. Well, yeah. Odin will potentially get us lethal in the next turn. We only need 1 damage. which is something we can probably pull off if we're lucky. There's a couple of ways to generate a blade, and that is one of them. Lair of Usurpation allows us to add Gilded Blade to hand, which will then allow us to play Odin. With our extra play point, we can then play Gilded Blade for the final one piece of damage we're missing after the Super Evolved Odin. Which they obviously realize and then concede, so... But yeah, we had perfect lethal in the end thanks to that top deck. Next up, we play against a Forest deck. Forest decks are a little more interesting. I recently started playing the Unkilling Forest variant, because that's going to be the next video, no surprise. And that deck actually has a pretty good matchup into Sword, typically. I found that the only two matchups that the Unkilling Forest deck did well into was actually into Sword and into Portal. I don't think I lost a single game to Portalcraft while playing Unkilling Forest. Because the Amulet Portal deck is just too slow. Pretty much just lets me always set up. But in Sword's case against Forest, you really just have to be pretty aggressive. But it does look like they're playing a more, I want to say conservative version. Probably something in the realm of Roach. Because that's currently, you have Roach and Unkilling basically as your two Forest variants. And we just kind of have to keep pushing some damage. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot we could play early. So it did kind of just burn out the cards we could have used. But honestly, that's not too bad. We can still use Zirconia here to flood our board for the turn. Which Forest will have to commit something to clearing, whether it is their 5-cost gold or whether it is more cards. Which it is going to be the gold. So this should allow them to basically full clear for a single Evo point. Definitely valuable. But not the end of the world for us here. We don't really have too many good options though, so I do end up going for the Usurpation play. Just, you know, send this card with Evo point. Generate a couple of loot cards that I'll eventually be able to fuse away. I do also like using Returning Slash quite a bit. It's both a draw, and if you already have a blade, you can just generate another blade to replace it for the legendary play. It's actually a really nice card. So maybe they are running Unkilling. Looking at the rest of the cards they're playing, because this is very similar to the Unkilling deck I was running. Fortunately, Odin, pretty good card here. We're just going to go for the 4 damage though. We're not going to waste our Super Evos here, since we are going to probably need them. I'd only really waste the Super Evo on Odin if I know I can push for lethal. And there it is, the Unkilling. So we do have to end this game reasonably quickly. I think we have about 3-4 turns before that becomes something that they can use. Fortunately for us, that shouldn't really be a big problem, because now with this Odin play, we do get to actually push for potential lethal damage very soon. Because Usurpation plus the right amount of loot cards will get us lethal in the next turn. Unfortunately though, they did play the Lion, which means they basically just full healed all their damage. Lion is very good. It heals based on how many cards you have in hand, which Forest typically can max out on. So I end up freeing up space so I can grab these loot cards, because we're still going to play the Usurpation here. I don't know why that took so long. The animation for that was really slow, but hey. When you do it manually, it's way quicker. So we're going to full clear this, set up our Super Evo unit, and hit them in the face for 1 extra, and leave them on just 8 again. Which doesn't quite put them in lethal range unless I somehow manage to pull off an Albert plus some extra stuff, but honestly, that looks pretty promising. I will have to kind of eat the 8-9 here, but we can at least put them on a clock with this damage. And we are just 1 loot card effectively away from being able to kill them with Heir of Usurpation. Because we will get 1 off the other Usurpation card. And we can play both of those in the same turn. So we just need some way to get 1 loot card. And that actually will do it. That will generate 2 loot cards. Usurpation can then eat those loot cards through its fusion. And we can deal 2 damage to the entire enemy board, including their face for lethal. Actually goes pretty smoothly in the end. A little bit of a lucky top deck, but the odds of drawing a loot card was fairly high. Alright, next up we're playing into Havencraft. I actually had not too bad a time playing Sword into Haven. Overall, I think as long as you're more aggressive than the Haven deck is defensive, you're going to be fine. So if you can do as much damage as you can in your first 5 turns, that's typically where you're going to win the game out. Obviously, it does require them not to perfect draw. A perfect drawed Haven deck is very hard to beat, if not nearly impossible. which fortunately for me wasn't too big a problem because seeing an amulet come down turn 2 really does just mean I can start swinging at face for as much damage as I want here. And that's going to be very important in the long run of this match. We also end up forcing out the Veracity, so that's even better. Which ends up working in our favor a little bit here. It does mean I have to kind of waste 1 damage. Well, 2 damage technically. But I think it's worth it to make sure we clear this so they can't Evo it. Given that they do go into Evo for this turn. Plus we are setting up our Zirconia. Unfortunately, Blinding Faith was like the only card that Haven has that would have full cleared me there on turn 4. So a little disappointing on that front. But the Zirconia play is still going to restock our board enough that it shouldn't end up mattering. It's basically going to force them to have another form of removal. And I mean, this is a pretty good option, although it won't full remove. Not on its own anyway. And that is pretty nice for us. So, I do end up making what I want to say is a reasonably small error here. So I do end up consuming 4 of these. I probably shouldn't have consumed Blade in the end, but maybe I should have. So what I shouldn't have attacked with the 2-2 first to pop the barrier. I should have hit them with Blade and then got the extra damage off the 2-2. That would have put me 1 damage ahead. It's just a very small misplay, but in a Haven matchup, 1 health can be the difference between winning and losing sometimes. So really got to be a little mindful of which order you want to do things in and how you want to play the match out. So we do see the Repose come down. Fortunately, our Air of Usurpation, I believe, is 6 damage currently for its Super Evo. So a clear Odin play here with Super Evo, plus the 2 to the face, and then potentially the Odin or the Usurpation in the next turn should win us the Haven matchup. Like I said, being super aggressive and getting as much damage as possible early seems to be the most important thing you can do in a Haven matchup. Also, making sure to keep an Odin to deal with things like Wilbert is nearly always important as well. Because if you can just banish the Wilbert and then go face, that basically just wastes their entire turn. Luckily for us, didn't really matter. Like, Usurpation will do it even without that, so Odin could have won us the game, sure, but Usurpation will also just straight up win us the game, so ended up working really nicely. So overall, I'd say I'm about 50-50 on this deck. I'm not super committed to it. There wasn't a single game that I won that was worth showcasing where I'd used Hollowness Manifest. I just don't think this card is that good. Like, it's fine. Like, really, the only nice thing is the generation of loot cards that it can do. And, like, yeah, its countdown is kind of nice. I just don't know. I'm not sold on that as a legendary, honestly. Which is why I am also running it as a 2 of. I don't know. The rest of it, I think, is fine. I think you can run it pretty well and do pretty well with it, but it's really just that card. I would have to experiment with the deck more, see more people play it, and then really make an opinion on that part, but based on the about 10-ish, 15-ish games that I ended up playing with this deck, I would say I won about half, and some of them were like pretty brutal to try and win, so hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. You can hit the like button, subscribe for more content, find the deck list in the description below, and until next time, guys, I'll see you then.